For today's agenda, we are going to jump right into it here in just a minute and get a legislative update from NC Child lobbyist Ashley Perkinson. And we will also be delving a little bit deeper into the House budget highlights, and both Ashley and Fawn Pattison, our campaigns director, will be helping us with that. So in the spirit of trying to keep these calls shorter as we've gone through the summer, we're going to get right into it. We'll leave some time at the end for announcements if anybody has any announcements. And throughout the presentations, everyone will be on mute, but we urge you to please put any questions you have in the chat, or we will open things up for discussion as we go through the items. So I am now going to turn it over to Ashley Perkinson.
Thank you so much, Adam, and good morning, everybody. It was a big week at the General Assembly this week. We saw the House unveil its proposed budget, at least many portions of the proposed budget. The area subcommittees met just yesterday to unveil those provisions. Both the House Health Appropriations Committee met and the House Education Committee met, and the other subcommittees as well. And we will be going over those highlights. We will not see the full House budget, which will include additional provisions addressing teacher salary, proposed tax cuts, some of these larger ticket items until the beginning of next week. The House Full Appropriations Committee is set to meet Tuesday morning. Of course, we'll be there covering that discussion. There may be amendments offered at that time during the Appropriations Committee. Then we, of course, expect the budget to go to the full House floor for consideration. And then after that, the House and Senate leadership will work together to iron out the differences between the two budgets. And then it will be on to the governor's desk for consideration. Before we hit on those budget highlights, I do want to mention a couple other developments that happened this week. We saw Senate Bill 35. That is the bill that would set the minimum age in North Carolina to marry from 14 to 16. And also for those 16 and 17-year-olds who marry, there could be no more than a 4-year age difference for those marriages. So that bill did get a favorable report in House Health, and it is scheduled for the full House consideration next week, I believe August 10th. Also saw some movement with House Bill 608, dignity for women who are incarcerated, to prohibit shackling and other restraints that were brought to the attention of legislators that prompted the filing of this bill. So of course that bill passed the House already. It has been in Senate rules, but it's been moved out of rules to Senate Health. And if it passes Senate Health, it will then go to Senate Judiciary. So I'll start with some of the budget highlights, start with the health budget. There was several provisions highlighting additional funding for individuals with disabilities. The House budget includes funding for an additional 1,000 innovation waiver slots. Now that mirrors the same provision that we saw in the Senate budget. We also saw an effort to increase Medicaid reimbursement rate for private duty nurses, also additional increases for direct support staff with home and community-based services and with intermediate care facilities that help individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. There was also an extension of Medicaid coverage for families, for parents that temporarily lose custody of their children. So during that time, they would be able to maintain that Medicaid coverage. Another item of Medicaid extension that we did not see, however, in the House budget, as you remember, an item that NC Child has advocated for is extension for Medicaid from 6 weeks to a year postpartum for new moms. Now, of course, that provision is included in the Senate budget. We did not see that language reflected in the House budget. The House budget does include $150 million in non-recurring dollars for lead and asbestos remediation, both for child care facilities and for public schools. So that was great great to see that funding included. There was also, and this was not surprising, an emphasis on additional telehealth coverage. Now, this has been an item that the House has really led the efforts on over the last few sessions. So there's language from House Bill 149 that would require telehealth coverage by insurance companies. That language is included in the House budget. There is also language for funding for the Key Rental Assistance Program to provide rental subsidies for eligible low-income and disabled individuals. There was also funding for a pilot. This is a virtual behavioral health services pilot, $10 million to help establish a competitive grant program to support virtual behavioral health services. Additional funding for the statewide telepsychiatry program. Local health departments received, the proposal is for local health departments to receive $36 million to fight communicable diseases. There are actually 85 other communicable diseases in the state in addition to COVID. And so this is meant to focus on supporting infrastructure for local health departments throughout the state. In other areas of the budget, there is funding, $2.5 million non-recurring to support transitional living support for youth reentering the community. There's an additional 1.36 non-recurring, 1.36 million non-recurring to establish a separate division of juvenile justice within the Department of Public Safety. I will pause there because I think Fawn is going to pick up on some of the early education highlights. I will mention one of the bills that NC Child has had as its priority, House Bill 574. We did not see that language reflected in the House budget, but there are some other great aspects on the early childhood front. And I'll turn it over to Fawn to go through some of those provisions.
Thanks so much, Ashley. We're tag teaming it over here today. Yeah, as Ashley said, we're disappointed not to see House Bill 574 included in the House budget. It was also not in the Senate budget. And what that bill would have done is increase the rates that childcare providers are reimbursed for childcare subsidy. It's an overdue increase, and we're disappointed that it's not included. And that's not the only thing I'm disappointed about, y'all, when it comes to early childhood education in this House budget. There's no provision to increase those subsidy rates. We don't see any increase in the wages program. We don't see any additional subsidy spots for families who are on the wait list. We've now got over 20,000 families statewide on that waiting list for childcare subsidy spots. And we've heard a lot from the legislature about how they want to get people back to work. So this is pretty disappointing. There's also no increase for early intervention services. Another bill that is included in its entirety is Senate Bill 570. So that bill is called Hold Harmless Star Ratings. That bill is included in the House budget as well. And that would, I think the idea is some regulatory relief for child care centers when they're having trouble staffing, but there are some challenges with that as well. So a couple things. So what the House has proposed with early childhood is very similar to what the Senate proposed, just a couple of differences and notable things to highlight. One is Smart Start funding. So the House is recommending a $15 million increase for Smart Start. That is the same as what the Senate proposed. However, the Senate had proposed a non-recurring increase, meaning it would be over after the biennium. The House recommended a recurring funds for Smart Start. So that's good. And then another good thing that the House did is one time they want to use $30 million in federal American Rescue Plan funds to cover parent copays through the remainder of 2021. So those are just some notable differences between House and Senate. But overall, kind of disappointing. We have a bunch more details and analysis on early childhood that I can't really and won't necessarily get into in this presentation that our campaign specialist, Elizabeth Byram, put together. She did a side-by-side between the governor's proposal, the Senate, and the House's proposals. That's on our website now, and we'll include that when we send you a follow-up email after the call today. So I'm pausing for a second too, and I'm going to talk for a second with a federal update. But before I do that, just wanted to see if folks have any budget questions. And I see a comment from the Early Education Coalition. Yeah, there is also one-time ARP funding in the House budget for the workforce development pipeline in early childhood. So that's good. But if they don't get those wages up, it's going to be hard to move people through that pipeline for early educators. So, so those are just a few of the challenges we are seeing. I will keep watching the chat, and I'm sure Ashley will too, for budget questions, but there was quite a lot going on also in Washington over the last week or two. So we want to also share a federal update with you. The first thing I want to share for those of you who are tracking the eviction moratorium, the CDC's eviction moratorium is back on for now, but we are, and somebody correct me if the court decision has already come down because I haven't seen news on it this morning. But the federal CDC eviction moratorium expired on July 31st. And after pressure from the squad, really, from liberal Democrats in the House, the White House reinstated that moratorium. It's already been challenged in court by landlords. It's pretty shaky as to whether the White House has the authority to extend that moratorium any further. In the meantime, I think agencies are rushing to try to get relief funds out to people who are at risk of being evicted during a pandemic, because we know those relief funds are out there, but getting them to people has been extremely difficult. And one thing we shared in our newsletter this week, and I think we'll be continuing to reshare, is outreach materials from the state's HOPE program to help with rent and utilities assistance. So we'll share those again, but want to make sure you're aware of those and can share them with the folks that you serve. Second, the federal infrastructure package, which hopefully you've been hearing about. I know you've heard about it from us. So there's sort of two parts. There's the hard infrastructure pieces, roads and bridges. And then there's the second piece, and there's a bipartisan deal on the hard infrastructure, the roads and bridges. It was originally, I think Biden was calling it the American Jobs Plan.
Yeah.
And whoever is unmuting yourself, if you could remute, that would be great. But the Senate has reached a bipartisan agreement on that package at $1 trillion. The bill is known as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So it's slimmed down from what Biden had proposed. However, kumbaya, there are Republicans and Democrats on board with this. A couple things to note about it is that the bill includes $65 billion for rural and tribal broadband access. Really, the idea is trying to get high-speed internet to everybody in the country. Funding to try to replace all of the lead pipes and service lines in the country. So that's a clean water initiative that we really want to celebrate, and big investments in public transit and other things that will help low-income families. When we send out our follow-up email today, we'll include a fact sheet on how this Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act will impact North Carolina specifically. So that's part one. And then part two is that human infrastructure bill y'all have heard about from us, because it would have big investments in healthcare, childcare, education, things like paid leave, climate programs. That is not a bipartisan deal. However, Democratic leadership in the House has said, we're not voting on your bipartisan Senate bill unless you also pass part two, this human infrastructure bill. So the horse trading is happening now. When and if the Senate passes both of these items, the US House would need to then come back and vote. So expect this to be happening into September and stretching through the fall. So there's your federal infrastructure update. Last thing is that the special enrollment period for healthcare.gov will be ending soon on August 15th. So right now, folks can still go to healthcare.gov and get those subsidized plans. If you serve families who might need health coverage, let them know. We're going to be also including in today's written update a communications toolkit about that from Community Catalyst. It's a really nice set of tools for social media and your newsletter and things like that to make sure that folks can get covered. So that is the federal update. Let me look at comments and chats and see if there's anything in here. Back to the budget for a second, I think the comment is really important from the Early Education Coalition. Keep in mind that we haven't seen the final budget yet. We'll see, the final pieces from the House next week. We know we're waiting on big ticket items to be unveiled, like teacher raises and anything else. So we'll see that next week. So the fight isn't over. And then once the House and the Senate have both released their full budgets, they still have to go to conference. They have to try to negotiate with the governor. So there's definitely still room for improvement. There's lots of work ahead. Really appreciate all of you, calling your legislators, emailing about these important topics. So thank you for all the work that you have put in. Any other questions about the budget or any of this other stuff? Okay. Last thing I wanted to mention is redistricting. Folks should know that the legislature, this is about to become a very big topic that you're going to hear about, not as much from us, but in general. Census data will be arriving next week. And so legislators got started this week on how they want to do their redistricting work. The reason I wanted to mention it is that they have launched a website for public comment. So if this is an issue that you're particularly passionate about, you can go ahead now and submit a letter or comments to the legislature. And that redistricting comment link is open, and we'll include that in our follow-up email today too. So that was the last thing that I wanted to talk about. And I don't see any other questions coming in the chat, Adam.
Okay. Well, certainly a lot of food for thought there. And I think as people are alluding to, I mean, the verdict is still out on pretty much everything at this point. We don't know how things are going to shake out in its final form, and how this whole budget negotiation is going to go down in North Carolina over the next few weeks. It'll be very interesting to see. And at the federal level as well, we have two very intriguing situations. I think North Carolina, for example, I read we're on one of only, I'm actually surprised by this. There's only two states that haven't finalized a budget yet, and North Carolina is one of them. I was kind of surprised that 48 other states got it together and have done it. But so, we need to get it done, hopefully. And as y'all know, we haven't had a final agreed upon budget for a couple of years. And everybody keeps saying, we got to make it happen. We got to make it happen. But then getting there and making the compromise really work is the hard part. So do folks have any announcements, any other things they'd like to comment on before we adjourn today? All right. Oh,
can I repeat? I'm sorry,
please.
Adam. Can I just remind everyone that all the prepaid health plans are here to provide information to providers and the Medicaid community. We are working together along with the independent enrollment broker and Medicaid ombudsman. So I haven't put my information there, but I am Tita Nieves with AmeriHealth Caritas, and we are again working together. Feel free, please, to involve us in any information, because our community and providers are having many, many questions with regards to this transformation and managed care process. So I will put my information in there, and wishing everyone to have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for this opportunity, Adam.
Welcome. Thank you. Okay. If there's nothing else, again, we appreciate you tuning in this week. Next Friday, we should have even more news where the House is probably finalized and passed their version of the budget. So we'll be able to share, exactly what's in that final version and continue to look ahead. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend.